All right, man, peace. So ESPN recently decided that they were going to compile a list of the top 10 most influential NBA athletes of all time. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Meanwhile, ESPN had a panel of experts rank the top 100 all-time NBA players who have done the most to change the way we play the game, how we talk about the game, and the culture of basketball. Michael Jordan came in at number one on the list.
Well, that's not a surprise. And to be quite frank with you, Michael Jordan's name is always the most apparent, the most consistent, and the most predictable name, and the most well-deserved name as the most influential NBA player of all time. Because he is, and to be quite frank with you, it's not even a close second. He is the most influential NBA player, arguably the most influential athlete of all time. Many people will say Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Ali was extremely influential in the way that people thought, how they viewed themselves, especially so-called black men. What Michael Jordan was able to do is that he was able to change the paradigm of what an NBA player should expect of himself. He transcended the normal roles that were designated for NBA players. Off guards were viewed as players that, yes, could score, but could not be your leading scorer and expect for you to win a championship. Particularly since when we viewed the previous great off guards / guards, because oftentimes many of those players would play the point and or the off guard position. They were interchangeable. Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, they never won anything. They never won until they got all-time great big men. Oscar Robertson had to team up with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Jerry West had to team up with Wilt Chamberlain. Once again, Michael Jordan is the first non-big man to have his own era, to have his own dynasty, and not have a dominant big man accompanying him. He's the first player to ever do that in NBA history, to have his own era. Now, Isaiah Thomas, this is why Isaiah Thomas is the greatest small guard to ever play the game, because he was able to win back-to-back championships and not have a dominant big man. But many people don't understand this, and they talk about how LeBron James is put under greater scrutiny than Michael Jordan. Prior to Michael Jordan winning the championship, he was viewed as a me-first player who did not make his teammates better and would never win a championship. He was viewed as being the most exciting player in the NBA, but nowhere near the basketball IQ of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Which is why when he initiated the era known as the Michael Jordan era in the 1990s, which pushed the NBA from being a very entertaining national professional sports league to a global league, which is what it is now. That's why he's deified, to be quite frank with you. And it is very off-putting as someone who lived through that era and saw the rise of Michael Jordan from a singular phenomenon to someone who has come to embody team success, which is very strange because, once again, before he won his first championship, he was viewed as a player who would never win a championship. Because, once again, many of his most ardent critics believed that he was selfish and that he did not understand the team concept, to a degree, including his coach, Phil Jackson. But just in the way that Jordan influenced the style of play, he influenced the style that the other players wore their uniforms. He influenced how they dressed off the court. He influenced the jewelry. Very few players were wearing an earring until Michael Jordan started wearing the hoop earring in 1988 or 89, whenever that was. Of course, he started the ball head craze that became very popular in the 1990s. Once again, you had guys who did not even have receding hairlines that were shaving their head bald in the early 90s because of Michael Jordan. Look at Chris Webber. Chris Webber used to shave his head bald. Shaquille O'Neal. They shaved their heads bald because of Michael Jordan, man. They were not going bald. And that's not even to talk about his influence in the business sector, being someone who showed players how they could allocate a certain space for themselves in the corporate world with sponsorships and endorsements and make themselves potential billionaires. That is why, once again, when people talk about how LeBron James speaks up for the people and he's into social justice and blah, 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 the reason why LeBron can do that is because he knows that Nike, number one, has his back. Number two, He has $100 million contracts with Nike and other endorsements that even if the NBA decides to try to shut his mouth, he has a nice little windfall to fall back on. That's all thanks to this man right here, Michael Jordan. He's the one who established that. He was the first explorer to find that land, metaphorically speaking. He was the one who planted his flag and showed players the way. So sometimes people have to see the forest through the trees. He could have acted like a big revolutionary in a corporate world back in the late 80s and early 90s and cut off his nose to spite his face. Or he could have learned the game, mastered it, and showed others the way.
Was due to his athletic achievement and how he empowered athletes to obtain full economic participation in the billions of dollars generated by their labor. Here's the top 10 from the list. Take a look at that. LeBron came in at number 2, followed by Magic Johnson, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain. I'm wondering where Clyde Frazier is.
I'm guessing that the reason why Molly Karam is saying that she's wondering where Clyde Frazier is because she's trying to allude to Clyde Frazier as a quote-unquote style icon. He truly was the forerunner of players like Dwayne Wade and Russell Westbrook, who decided that they're going to get attention for themselves by dressing like freaks. The problem with Clyde Frazier is that even though his style of dress was unique and to an extent influential, it was very indicative of that time period, meaning many of the other players were also dressing like him. It's just that he took it to the next level, with the capes and the oversized hats, things of that nature, the wide brim hats and headwear. During the 80s and 90s, the dress style became much more conventional. Now, when Jordan came to the fore in the early 90s, once again, he influenced how many of the other players in the NBA dressed in regards to how they sized their suits. He brought the baggy style into the NBA. He brought the baggy style into basketball. Players were wearing their shorts basically like 2 inches below the scrotum when he came into the NBA. In 87 is when Jordan decided to add some bagginess to the shorts, where they were basically like 3 inches above the knee. Then by 1990, Jordan brought them to about 1 inch above the knee. And then, of course, you had the Fab Five, who started the style of wearing the shorts even below the knee, as well as the black socks. But Jordan was the one. Jordan's also the one who started the black shoes in the playoffs. There's so many things. The armband, of course, the knee band that he pulled down to show the red. There's so many things that he did stylistically to influence other players that they were not doing before. He turned everything into a style.
Stephen A., I'll start with you. Based on the criteria, do you agree that MJ should be number 1?
No, I do not. I think that he should be probably top 3 or what have you. I'm certainly not trying to take anything away from him, but I'm thinking from a societal perspective, the kind of impact that Bill Russell had on not just the game of basketball, but sports, and then more importantly, Magic Johnson with the Magic Bird era.
Let me say this. Stephen A. Smith makes a very valid point. What I would add, though, is that if you're going to have Bill Russell as number 1, then you'd have to have Oscar Robertson as number 2, because those two players were essential to bringing the NBA forward in regards to player rights, free agencies, and salary. They were essential in that era. Now, when you talk about a Magic Johnson and a Larry Bird, you have to twin them as well, because they initiated the modern era of the NBA, where they took it out of the dark ages into the light and made it viable, made it mainstream. But what Jordan did, once again, he took it from a national game to a global game.
Because Magic Johnson was really when a black athlete became marketable. The first time that you really got the impression that the rest of the masses were letting a black man into their living room. And
I wouldn't go that far, Stephen A. Smith. I understand what you're saying. Maybe from an NBA perspective, Magic Johnson was the first so-called black athlete in the NBA that the masses viewed as someone that was acceptable. But we could also make that case for Dr. J. And if we're talking about just athletics, O.J. Simpson preceded them both as being a black athlete that was acceptable, that was palatable for the white majority in America. And if we want to go back even further, we could talk about athletes like Ray Robinson back in the 50s, Joe Louis back in the 30s and 40s, as being the first black athletes that went mainstream, to a degree. But I understand the point that he's trying to make with Magic Johnson. But I think that Dr. J may even have preceded him a little bit. The thing with Magic is that Magic's personality was effervescent. He was very, very welcoming. His charisma really overflowed. Dr. J, although a welcoming spirit because he was so placid, he was so laid back that it was difficult to sell his personality. How they tried to move the Dr. J experiences through his class. He was debonair. Michael Jordan kind of combined the two of their personas. He wasn't as effervescent as Magic, but he wasn't as laid back as Dr. J. So it really made him the perfect pitch man.
And into their home, Magic Johnson gave you that impression. He sort of set the stage for Michael Jordan to take the bull by the horn and elevate the NBA brand, and a black athlete being that popular to another level.
Yeah, Dr. J did too, Magic Johnson did too. They set the stage, but it's Michael Jordan first, and by far I don't even think anyone else is in the conversation. First,
I agree. And since Max Kellerman brought it up, let me also say this. In the last 5 years, the most influential player in the NBA has been Steph Curry. When you see how teams are playing, how you win championships with long-range shooting. There was a time when I was growing up where there were only probably one or two players that coaches even allowed to pull up for three off the dribble. Mark Price was allowed to do it. Maybe Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf if he got hot. If you were in a dire situation, certain players would do it. Much less being allowed to pull up from 25, 27 feet, which is customary now in the NBA. You have Steph Curry to thank for that.
First of all, the popularity of basketball worldwide is basically due to Michael Jordan. He took it to new levels. The explosion of the value of the sneaker industry is all...
Absolutely. I neglected to mention that. Yes, the sneaker industry pretty much is built off of Michael Jordan. The entire sneaker industry.
Almost all Michael Jordan, still like 10 times as many Jordan sneakers sell as LeBron sneakers. And Jordan hasn't played in how many years now? The crossover into popular culture, not just in terms of commercials, but as movies, as vehicles for him. The former player is tycoon and owner, to say nothing of the influence on the game. You know, how we think of it, hero ball, iso ball, facing the basket. 7-footers started doing it. They wanted to be like Mike. Championships, the standards of perfection. Look, it took until LeBron James, who wears 23, by the way.
Great point. For those who may try to claim that LeBron James is more influential than Michael Jordan, how could he be more influential than Michael Jordan when he wanted to be Michael Jordan? And for those who are wondering, yes, Michael Jordan is a monarch athlete. I was having a conversation about that with a brother this past weekend. Yes, Michael Jordan is a monarch athlete. He is an asset. Okay? That's what the film Space Jam was all about. He was the proverbial Alice in Wonderland. Once again, he had to follow the white rabbit, in this case that being Bugs Bunny. But that was a ritual that was played out utilizing Michael Jordan. He's an asset. But that's neither here nor there. I'll probably be doing a video on Jordan very soon.
Until we got someone, anyone, who moved past the total shadow of Michael Jordan. It's Jordan number one.
Well, let me say this, Max Kellerman. I'm not disagreeing with anything that you're saying about Michael Jordan. I'm simply saying it couldn't have happened if those guys did pave the way. Like, for example, Allen Iverson had a profound impact on the world of sports. He changed, it was structured at that particular moment in time. He sort of changed the culture of the NBA.
Allen Iverson had a profound impact on that era. And to be quite frank with you, he set the NBA back, which is why they had to controvert many of his contributions by bringing in the dress code. And that was one of the best things that the NBA ever did, was bring in the dress code to stop a lot of that element of chaos that he was trying to bring into the NBA. Once again, brothers, and I know a lot of dudes are not going to like that, but a chaotic person can never bring order. They can't bring order into your life. They cannot bring order into your business. Now, sometimes you have to accept them because of the level of talent that they have. Allen Iverson was a talented brother, but as you can see, even throughout his life, there basically had to be a support system there to save him from himself, because he was such an agent of chaos for everything around him. Everything that he subjected himself to, everything that was forced to be associated with him, had to endure his attempts at bringing chaos and anarchy. Whether it was the NBA, whether it was some of the companies that were affiliated with him, whether it was his family. So that late 90s, early 2000s era was a crucial era for the NBA. And they were fortunate to get through it because of very good marketing. And David Stern did a great job of weathering that storm once Michael Jordan retired. And that was one of the reasons why they welcomed Jordan back, because they needed to close that narrative and put a little bow on the Michael Jordan narrative. So they brought him back as a wizard in order to provide some closure, not just for Jordan, but for the fans and also for the NBA. Because like I was telling a brother, Michael Jordan's almost like the basketball version of Jason Bourne. You know, like when you watch the Jason Bourne series, they have Operation Treadstone, and then they moved on to Operation Blackbriar. And, you know, at least conceivably, you would think that the agents that were created, the assets that were created in Operation Blackbriar would be better and improved upon than Jason Bourne, because he was part of an earlier program. But Jason Bourne always proves that he's the best agent that they've ever been able to create, because he had singular qualities that they were not able to replicate. That's Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan's like Jason Bourne. Even though LeBron James is an updated model, he was expected to take the league to even further heights. There were certain qualities that LeBron James is missing that they were not able to replicate, that they were able to create within Michael Jordan. So, or like Captain America with the super soldier serum. They tried to replicate it, but they were not able to replicate the man because of the qualities that were intrinsic within him. But yes, Michael Jordan was an asset, a monarch athlete. It is what it is.
I get that, and I'm not disagreeing with you per se. I'm simply saying none of that could have happened had it not been for those who preceded him paving the way. That's all I mean. That's the only...
Well, that's obvious, Steve, but that's like saying that we should have Jack Johnson above Muhammad Ali because Jack Johnson kind of paved the way. They get honorable mention, but there are certain stars, there are certain people who come along that their shine, their luminosity is so bright that you have to give them the nod over those that came before. Because if that's the case, then we should have Elgin Baylor number one, because Elgin Baylor influenced Connie Hawkins and Dr. J, who influenced Jordan. So we cannot always just go back to the source. Sometimes we have to note who had the greatest impact. Those can be two different things. It's like Steve Nash had an influence on Steph Curry, but in regards to overall impact, Steph Curry is above Steve Nash.
The only reason I'm not trying to minimize or deny Michael Jordan's impact.
Let me also say this. Jordan also set the league back with the glamorization of the hero ball style, which many of the players in the late 90s, early 2000s tried to mimic, and it took the NBA down a notch. And so since I brought up Steve Nash, I'll also give him credit for being part of the team that first lit the spark for the return to team basketball, which are the Phoenix Suns of the mid-2000s. Because everybody was trying to mimic Jordan with that hero ball style, whether it was Kobe, Tracy McGrady, Allen Iverson, Vince Carter. They were all trying to do it, and it did not look as pleasing to the eye. Because once again, Jordan had qualities that those other guys didn't have.
Or that of Kobe, LeBron, or anybody else. I'm simply saying it wasn't possible unless the Magics of the world, Dr. J is right, and the Bill Russells came before him. That's all I'm saying.
No Melly Mel, no Cool G Rap, no Jay-Z. No, right, but that doesn't mean Melly Mel or G Rap were more influential than Jay-Z.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Max Kellerman.
You see what I'm saying?
Of course.
Well, listen to me. Why do I give Run DMC all the love in the world? Because they could talk all of this stuff. Sucker MCs, Rock Box, the whole bit, Adidas, my Adidas, all this stuff. They did their thing. And that's what paved the way. That's why I give them that kind of love.
By the way, guys, good news for the Cavs. It looks like Ty Lue.
But anyway, that's pretty much it on this topic. Like I stated, I'll probably be working on a video pertaining to Michael Jordan somewhere down the line. But many of these guys on this list have associations either with Luciferianism or with being assets, being program multiples. Michael Jordan, definitely an asset. LeBron James, in my view, certainly an asset. Magic Johnson attended Michigan State, which, as we know, has CIA ties. Magic Johnson was also put through the training by Mr. Jerry Buss. Bill Russell, Kappa Alpha Psi, doing the one knee pledge for Colin Kaepernick and claiming that it was for Stephon Clark. So, I mean, the list goes on and on. It is what it is. Oscar Robertson, I believe, is also a Kappa Alpha Psi. And someone asked me about Dr. J. Yes, Dr. J is a Luciferian. His brother died from lupus. I'm not going to attribute that to Dr. J or any type of sacrifice. You know, many people oftentimes overuse that terminology. But Julius Erving, Dr. J, was involved, in my view, with the disappearance of one of his sons. They must all give a sacrifice to their God, to their God, the goat God. But it is what it is. Peace.